Hello to everyone in our audience, and especially to those of you in our virtual cinema. My name is Duncan Dykes. Welcome to DocEdge 2022. Today in Q&A, we have Åsa Ekman, one of the directors of Live Till I Die. Åsa, it's so great to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. I mean, it's amazing that we can even do this. Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
No problem. And also, you're joining us from Sweden, so this is about as far away from each other as we could possibly get.
Yeah, exactly. So here it's Sweden lunch hour.
So just to let people know, the way this works is I'll start us off with a couple of questions. And then if you're in our virtual hub, then you'll be able to put some questions in the chat. And at about the halfway point, we'll turn to you guys and we'll put those questions to Åsa. So just to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about how you came across this story, where your entry point into this story was?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we, Film and Tell, we're a company that works with, in the genre of film for change. So we actually had the topic before we found the characters. And it's because my co-directors and myself, we have experiences with having, parents or like elderly, like grandparents staying in these kind of homes. And we could really see what an amazing change one person can make. One person who works there, it can make such a big change for the people who are living there. And we also know that in Sweden, there's going to be a big, there's not going to be enough caregivers, in coming years. And we thought of this, and I just thought, okay, how can we make a film about elderly care that anyone wants to see? Because usually, when you think of elderly care, it's like death, anxiety, pain, all of that stuff. I'm not going to say everything that anyone might think of, but it could be quite depressing. So I started to make research to find like a character who could kind of show us this world, but with humor and love. So, and then I found Monica on Facebook, actually. Yeah. And I went to see them, and I could go on speaking about this forever, but yeah, that's how I found her, and then I went to see them. Yeah.
And so within the 4 directors, it was you that first made contact with Monica?
Yes. It was.
So I was going to ask, with 4 directors, obviously that's quite a unique setup relative to all the other films we have in the festival. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what the dynamics are like in terms of splitting up the directing workload and decision making?
Definitely. I mean, we really truly believe, and through a lot of experience, that documentary filmmaking is such a collective experience, and that we all make directors' choices, but in different places in the process. So, for example, I was doing. Oscar had the idea. He had like really this vision of the film. And I did a lot of research, and I found the characters, and I spent 8 months to work with all, to get all the okays to start filming, to get the access. And then I brought in Gustav, who's the cinematographer. And we thought that really the best scenes could also be done if he was there filming together with the sound person, and that I wouldn't be there. It's also something that I've experienced a lot, that like when the director enters the room, it can sometimes become so that the characters start, doing things because they believe that the character expects something. So I wanted to have like a really small team. So Gustav was filming there alone, and sometimes had this sound person, Hannes, with him. And then I was watching the material, and we were talking about, the material and what scenes to shoot and how to build the dramaturgical structure and stuff. And then we brought in Anders, who's the editor. And actually, the process we have is that we start as a workshop, but then, and we have like a script on the wall. And then he starts working for himself for 2 or 3 weeks. And he makes a lot of director's choices as an editor. So, and all the way, we've also had like director's meeting through this point. So, I mean, this is not how a lot of people do. I mean, this is how we like to do it. And yeah, that's kind of the process.
And forgive me if this is an obvious question to someone not from New Zealand, but is that commonplace in Sweden, or is that quite unique to this production?
To work in a collective like that, I think it's not very common. I think there's like maybe one other group that kind of works like that. And it's also a problem because, when we're applying for money, or we apply to go to festivals to pitch. It's like always, why are you 4 directors? How can you do this? So a lot of people get a bit upset about it because we're kind of breaking the rules here, but we want to stay true to what we believe is the best process for the best film. And this has worked well. I mean, we've developed this method over 10 years. So but it's really challenging sometimes because, of course, we're all strong people with strong wills, and someone has to have the sign off for the final cut. But we never had to use it. But Oscar, who is the founder of Film and Tell, he has the final cut. But I mean, he's never had to use it. But of course, there has to be some kind of clearance on who has the final decision in something. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, the style works well. The film, it's fantastic. I wanted to ask, so with any documentary, there's obviously the people that are on film, it's usually their first time involved in something like this. Can you talk at all about how comfortable Monica, but also the residents of the home were with being on camera for essentially the first time, I imagine?
Yes. I mean, first of all, when I met Monica, when I called her, she said, I would like to, I'm doing this film project. Can I come and see you? She's like, I don't have time for film project. I don't have time for you, but you can come and hang around. You can sit with me, just hang around and do, all sorts of things. So I was just hanging out with them for a day. And, the first person I met was Bengt when he was coming in for this morning when they're doing this planning. And we went to talk to Eleonora. And I just felt so instantly in love with them. And I think also Monica really, we really clicked, so to speak. But then she was like, no, I can't be on camera. No. And she was more like, no, she didn't want to do it first. But then after a while, since we also were doing research for another 8 months before we could start shooting, she had a lot of time to kind of think about it. And she decided she wanted to do it. And then I think all the oldies, first of all, they're so used to being filmed all the time by Monica. So, and they thought it was just fun, that there are some people coming there and that it was, and that things were happening. But then, of course, Gustav got really close with Bengt and Ella so that they could actually, so she said, okay, when we're filming, when she's, about to die, I have on tape. I said to Gustav, you have to ask her tape if we can really film if she dies, should we have it on tape? Doesn't mean they would, should, publish it, but. And she was so fond of him, and also the Hannes, the sound technician. So I think they thought it was fun more than anything, And also with Monica, she's the leader there. Sorry?
No, sorry, continue.
No, but it's also like if you have the main character being so, like when she'd made the decision and she's the leader for them. So if she feels safe, they also feel safe. It's also a way of how to work with access. You find the person who has to grant the security and safety for the others. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought up those scenes with Eleanor. They're incredibly, incredibly impactful. I'm wondering how, as a team, what was your thinking going into filming something like that? Obviously a very, very sensitive sort of time to be in the room.
Well, honestly, it was kind of the goal for the whole film. It might sound weird, but we kind of really wanted to make a portrait of the people who sit with us when we die, because kind of in our culture, we have a lot of heroism around, doctors who save early or babies that are born early. It's a lot about, saving lives. It's a lot of heroic pictures around them, at least in Sweden. I don't know what it's like in New Zealand. But then we thought, okay, but those who sit with us when we die, who are they? And how can they cope with doing this? Why do they want to have this as a work? So this was kind of like a vision that we had from starting the filming. And I sort of understood, of course, while we started shooting, that someone would obviously die because they're very old. So we decided that we wanted to shoot until we could have that scene. So we were quite targeted towards that scene. And Eleonora wanted this. She wanted this to be filmed. So, yeah. And then, of course, you don't know when it's going to happen, of course, obviously. But that's the way of process filming, the observational documentary. It's about staying in touch, having contact, being there at the right moment. Yeah.
And I suppose even in a larger sense, that's sort of what Monica's experiencing, because there is that sort of feeling of, it's coming, but you don't quite know when it's going to happen, and you're just wanting to be there when it does. And the film captures that so wonderfully.
Thank you.
I guess to speak to Monica as well, has she had a chance to see the film? What does she think of it?
Yes, of course. We showed her the film in an early editing stage because we really want the characters to be comfortable with how we portray them. And we also did because this was shot before the pandemics, and then during the pandemics, we were not allowed to enter the house where they lived. But we went there and we arranged a screening of a rough cut, quite early rough cut because we knew that a lot of the characters, they were going to die pretty soon. And we really wanted them to have a chance to see the film before. And this was so magical. I mean, we were like on the same floor, but in different rooms. And we did this kind of solution, a virtual solution, but at least we were like in next door. And we could see them watch the film. And I could hear Bengt laughing at his own jokes. And one of the ladies who attended and watched the film, her husband, who had died, was in the film. And of course, it's such a nervous thing, what is going to be like for her? What is this going to evoke? But it was so amazing. They absolutely loved it. And it was an early cut as well. I mean, the story was there, but I'm so happy we did this. But then, of course, we've had another screening where the film was finished, but only 5 of the oldies still lived to be able to see it. And Monica has been attending all of our festival screenings here in Sweden, and she's super happy. She gets so much love from the audience. It's amazing. She's been in the papers also, and then people read it, and they just send her letters, and it's really nice to see. Yeah.
I think, as you say, people are responding to kind of a different kind of hero than they usually see in movies.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I guess one more question from me before we go to our audience.
Sure.
If there's one idea or emotion that you really want to leave an audience with after they see the film, what would that be?
Joy of living, of being alive, of having a life. Yeah. That's kind of.
So that's.
Did it do that to you?
It did, yeah. I mean, again, and I can think about my own grandparents as well when I watch the film, and it's this very kind of universal experience, I think. Yeah. Well, I think now we'll go to some questions from our audience. Our first question is from Alessandra. Is it difficult as a director to film highly emotional scenes like Eleanor's death?
Well, after having been part of, so not their lives, but having been there quite a bit, and I mean, Gustav was there filming this, and they became such good friends, and of course it's really painful, but also as a filmmaker, you sometimes have to shut off your feelings and just think of the scene as the scene, and how are you going to film the scene to make it as good as possible. And why is this important? It's because your first role in regards to the people you're filming is to direct the best film possible. And therefore, you sometimes have to shut off. And then the emotions can come afterwards. And a lot did afterwards. But also, they sat there the whole night. They took turns holding Eleonora's hand, the team and Monica. So it's a very highly existential moment. Yeah.
So I'll go to our next question now.
Sure.
This is from Paris. Was there anything that you loved that ended up cut from the movie? Obviously, you're there filming for quite a while.
Thanks for the question, Paris. I'm not very, how to say, emotional about those things. Sentimental, yeah. I'm not very sentimental. And I want to tell you, we've also cut down this film to a 1-hour piece, but also to 2 short films, 20 minutes and 7 minutes. And but what we did do, I mean, something I can just tell you shortly is that during the research, we did film in 3 other elderly homes because it took me 8 months to get access to the Monica story. And meanwhile, we were filming in other elderly care homes, and those could not be put in the film. So we made a short series, like a series of 8 short documentaries from that material as well. And but I mean, sure, I mean, Monica invited the oldies to her home party when she'd moved. It's a funny scene, you know. But everything that's not really part of building the story to where it's supposed to end, I can just easily take it out. I don't have so many darlings, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Well, our next question we have from Amelia. How long did you film for, and how did you know when you were finished? You say that you were done by the time coronavirus was an issue to deal with.
Well, we did. I mean, after I've been doing this extensive research, when we once started to shoot, we started in May and we finished in October. So it was like one of the fastest documentary film shootings that I've ever been through, because it all just happened so fast. And sort of when Eleonora had passed away, and when we needed to understand how would Monica be able to get back to work after that experience, how would she cope? So we filmed those scenes, and then we knew that we had the film. It's a nice feeling.
And I guess,
yeah.
Well, and also in terms of the filming Monica in the aftermath of those scenes, were there any points where Monica, I guess, was more reluctant to continue the film after you'd already started?
No. Normally, there's always a crisis or two with characters, but not with her. I think it's because we shot in such a short time.
Well, in that case, I'll go to our next question. We have from Hannah. Did the team stay in the rest home while you were filming?
Hi, Hannah. I'm not so sure if I understand the question. In the restroom.
Sorry, no, the rest home, so with the residents.
Oh, in the rest home. Okay, I thought you said restroom. I'm like, okay. No.
It'd be a very different movie, I imagine.
Exactly. That's why I was like, No. I mean, no. We live like in Stockholm, and then this is in the Stockholm area, so we all lived in our homes and could just drive there in half an hour or something, which was very convenient. Thanks.
Our next question is from James. We've already touched on this, but how much are you still in touch with Monica, besides her coming to, obviously, screenings of the film?
Yeah. Well, thanks, James. It's I'm in touch with her every week, I would say. She's very happy about the film. She's very sad sometimes because she's losing one oldie after the other. And they have also actually moved from this beautiful house to another building because this house, it was too old and was something with the working circumstances and stuff. And that was quite painful for her and for the oldest to move to like a modern building. And she has now 80 oldies that she's like an activity coach for. So she's a bit like, she has a lot to do, but I think she's learned more how to handle that now. So she's fine. She wants to start her own elderly care home also. So she's still full of energy. Yeah.
And it's wonderful that she's still got all that joy for the full experience of it, even after all the difficulties that come with it.
You know, you could actually follow her on Facebook. I could write it in the chat. If you want to follow her on Facebook, just do it.
I tell you what, we could probably attach that as a in our link when we put this on YouTube. But sure. Do you know her handle on Facebook, perhaps?
Sorry, do
you know her handle on Facebook where people could follow her?
Yeah, well, you could search for Swedish Stora Sköndal Magnolia. Magnolia. If you search for Magnolia, it's such a common. Okay, I'm gonna have to write it down for you somewhere.
Okay.
It's too complicated. Yeah.
Maybe we'll put it in the description on YouTube.
Yeah.
Our next question from Jason: are you working on any new projects right now that you can talk about at least?
Yes, absolutely. I'm working on a film about child cancer survivor, like about a young woman who survived having cancer as a child, and it's really because I mean, a lot of I think 85% of the children survive, but then there's a life after when you've carried this trauma. Like, how do you become an adult carrying all these late effects and traumas? So that's one film. And then I'm also working on a film that is taking place inside a bank. And it's about sustainable banking and sustainable investments.
And are you making those with the same collective of people?
No, actually not. I'm working with other collectives. So my role here as head of documentary is to invite the people who I think suits best for the film and to build a team that would, together make the best film. And it's amazing to be able to do that. So.
Right. Well, it looks like we have one more question from the audience, from Laura. As a director who spends so much time with your subject, how does this become part of your life and not just your film? How do you find that separation, I suppose, between going to this rest home every day and immersing yourself in the subject and then going home to your non-working life?
Well, thanks, Laura. It's such a valid question. When I was when I made my first feature documentary, I didn't know how to set boundaries. And it was very, very difficult. And it was actually during making that film that I sort of really understood what my first role is. It's not to become a friend. It's to make the best film. And then we can become friends afterwards. So I'm setting quite, we do set some common rules with the characters, on how do we communicate? How do you communicate to us if you don't want us to film, if you don't want to say it out loud? What hours on the day can we call each other? Or if it's something, maybe we do an SMS instead, if it's urgent, So we're kind of setting these boundaries just to make a clear definition of the relationship. And that makes it so much easier to not make it become like a very, very big part of your life. And then also I made 2 films about children who witnessed domestic violence while I was myself having first a 9-month-old kid, and then I bore a second kid during this film process that we were shooting for 4 years. So I had small children, and then I really had to learn how to set boundaries. But then, of course, it's very emotional. Often in the editing room, these feelings are coming up, like when you're taking part of someone's life, and often it's quite painful. In the editing room, it's like it's a place to process and mourn and laugh together. So it's like very emotional process. That's nice. But then also, of course, it's a big sadness. Like now I did the last sound work of these 3 edited pieces from Live Till I Die. I did them last week. And it was really the last thing that I'm supposed to do with the films. And of course, there's a mourning in it as well, to let go. It's like having your teenager leaving house, So it's both with joy and with pain, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, Åsa. It's been really wonderful having you with us. To everyone in our audience, if you haven't had a chance to see the film yet, I highly, highly recommend it. It's in our festival online until the 10th of July. And it's incredibly sweet, and it's really, really emotional. For those of you in our virtual hub, feel free to stick around for another hour. We've got some interactive exhibits and some XR stuff that's really groundbreaking, really interesting. And otherwise, again, one last time, thank you so much for joining us for this, Åsa.